The DCU is in full swing. Peacemaker Season 2 is finally here, and just like with Creature Commandos, I'll be making a breakdown/review of each individual episode. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and become a member of this channel in the Noble tier or above for early access to videos, or in the King tier for a special shout out. Thanks to these members for the extra support. Season 2 Episode 1 is titled The Ties That Grind, which might be a reference to one particularly insane scene we'll get to later, but for each episode going forward, I'll be starting the video off not with a review, but instead going over everything we learned about the DCU, and for this episode in particular, there is a lot. Most of what we learned comes from the previously on section. Previously on the DCU, not on Peacemaker, we see scenes from Peacemaker Season 1 that only now can be considered fully canon on-screen events in the DCU. Among them is a reference to Kite Man, which was confirmed canon by Gunn in the podcast already, Peacemaker's origin, his father and killing him, Jamil appears, the butterfly invasion, and then there are the DCU changes. Instead of the Justice League, Leota asks her mother to call in the Justice Gang, and then they show up. But not just that, they are also joined by Superman and Supergirl to replace the Justice League scene in Peacemaker. I gotta say, I definitely saw some version of this coming, but the fact that not just the founding members of the Justice Gang, but also Superman and Supergirl, I in particular did not see Supergirl coming. I didn't even think she's a hero yet by the events of Superman, let alone by the events of Peacemaker Season 1. It makes me wonder about the timeline, because Season 1 released in 2022, in the DCEU at least, it takes place in 2022. If that takes place then Supergirl is around on Earth just as long as Superman has been Superman. Maybe Kara coming to Earth actually forced Clark to reveal himself as Superman and as an alien. But then again, I think what's happening here is the timeline is being moved up. Superman's debut was in 2022, 3 years before Superman. The Suicide Squad moved up to 2023, or some version of those events. Peacemaker Season 1 in 2024, Creature Commandos, Superman, and Peacemaker Season 2 then take place in 2025. There is a 6-month jump at the beginning of the season, which I think could be the gap between the seasons if it wasn't for Creature Commandos and Superman. I mean, fitting both those events in between the two seasons, which you would have to do, I don't think 6 months is enough. So maybe let's say a year. It definitely isn't 3 years. There's no way. Anyway, Hawkgirl and Guy Gardner replace Flash and Aquaman, with Guy being aware of Peacemaker and the rumors he spreads about him, which refers back to a deleted scene from Season 1 that is now included in the previously on segment that references Green Lantern. James Gunn was told he can't use this scene during Season 1 because of whatever plans DC had for Green Lantern at the time, which was nothing apparently, but Peacemaker references Green Lantern in true Season 1 crazy conspiracy about a superhero fashion. We learned from the Rewatch podcast that the similar references to the Flash, Wonder Woman, and Green Arrow are maybe canon, maybe not, but at least we have this Green Lantern reference to replace at least one of them. Getting into the actual episode, we quickly learn about the alternate dimension, which James Gunn has referred to as Earth 2. Earth 2 has a superhero team known as the Top Trio, which consists of Peacemaker alongside Keith and Augie in whatever names they have. Throughout the episode, we get some references to DC characters and locations, which exist at least in Earth 2. This includes the Rainbow Creature, who is a Silver Age Batman villain with 2 total comic appearances and 2 animated series appearances. Then is the Ultra Humanite, a much bigger villain who I could definitely see maybe being a villain who actually appears this season. He is a scientist whose main thing is putting his mind in a revolving door of bodies, but most notably, a big white gorilla. He was Superman's first ever villain, who then also became an enemy of the JSA, who appeared on Stargirl. Also referenced is Nightwing City, Bloodhaven, or Bloodhaven as they pronounce it, Imps, and the Imp Dimension, which was also referenced in Superman with one of them appearing, and most importantly, me. Look at that, it's a statue of me in the first episode of Peacemaker. I see you, James Gunn, I appreciate the call out. I would appreciate an early look at these episodes the next time too though. Obviously, David Denman is playing the third vigilante, who is also Keith Smith, all expected but now confirmed. Gunn mentioned on Threads that David Denman's character also has some sort of comic book name, hopefully both of them are, with a similar concept as White Dragon, taking an obscure character from the comics, giving him a completely new story, but with the same name. Levis Thornwhite cameos returning from Superman, along the way referencing Arkham Asylum alongside Belle Reve as places criminals keep breaking out of in true DC Universe fashion. This is the first time Arkham has been referenced in the DCU. Technically, it was already confirmed because there was an Arkham Asylum show in development development, but because that show was cancelled, we then couldn't say for sure it exists. But now we know it is. They say Arkham, not Arkham Asylum, but let's hope it is Asylum because that's the iconic name. The only reason it was ever changed for like Joker or the Batman is because they wanted to be more realistic, and asylums don't exist anymore in America, but who cares? This is a fictional universe. Asylums should exist in the DC universe, specifically Arkham Asylum. Rick Flag is mentioned as the director of Argus, I believe for the first time. Like, he was in that high up meeting in Superman, but I don't think he was actually confirmed to be the director of Argus until now. And then finally, the episode sees the DCU debuts of the following characters. White Rabbit, a Batman villain in the comics, debuts, but as an attempted hero trying to become a member of the Justice Gang, and obviously rejected. I'd say it's unlikely she is a Batman villain in this world, but if nothing else, she is wearing the most comic accurate costume she could possibly wear. Then there's Sasha Bordeaux, who is almost always used as some sort of agent of some sort of organization. She's also a cyborg in the comics. We'll see if that's true here. And then technically Rick Flag Jr. is pictured. He was previously mentioned, but not technically seen outside of loose cannon media. Here we see Joel Kinnaman in the role. Alright, so obviously we learned a lot about the DCU from this episode, but now let's jump into the review. But actually, before the review of this episode, I think we should review the intro, which is true for every episode. Probably the most famous and iconic part of Peacemaker in general, the season 1 intro might just be the greatest TV intro of all time, so how do you live up to that? Tasted, the dance was fantastic and unexpected, and the visuals of that intro with the purple lights looked great. I never skipped that intro. This version, as expected, the music in this episode was great, with each musical choice fitting the scene and giving the series an overall vibe that is similar to season 1, but a bit less grungy and a bit more modern, maybe to reflect Earth 2 Peacemaker's more clean life. Getting to the episode itself, we start strong with the previously on segment, which was pretty much perfect, subtly adding in the deleted scene of Green Lantern and changing the Justice League for the Justice Gang was a simple yet effective way to change the canon of Peacemaker from being the DCU to being in the DCU. Again, I was surprised by Superman and especially by Supergirl, but even without the surprise of the Justice Gang, this was such a cool and effective way to go about it. The actual episode, post previously on, jumps right into the quantum unfolding area, interdimensional insanity, wasting no time to get to the other universe and immediately laying the groundwork for the main plot of the season. This was a great way to quickly establish what's to come. We return to Earth 2 later with the scene of a stoned, coke-fueled Peacemaker exploring his alternate house, accompanied by the perfect musical choice. Beyond the music, I also love the paraphernalia populating the house, including DC references and alternate universe subtle differences, like bands being spelled differently. I love things like that in multiverse stories. Keith Smith's name reveal, while not surprising, was immediately emotional due to the combination of our knowledge of Peacemaker's past and John Cena's fantastic acting. The scene where Chris basically sits while his alternate father and brother talk and are so kind and close to each other, and then how they say I love you to each other at the end, was so emotional, so well acted, and such a grand idea that perfectly follows up on the emotional through line of season 1. This is really thrown into chaos when Peacemaker meets his alternate self. The ensuing fight is great, intense, brutal, visually fantastic with the quantum unfolding area in the background, and just a generally great action scene ending in an unexpected, really quick death to the alternate Peacemaker. Now, as James Gunn pointed out in an interview, Peacemaker has killed his brother, his father, and himself, while immediately making this alternate reality a lot worse just by visiting once or twice. I'm definitely excited to see what they do with this going forward. Getting back to the beginning, Chris and Leota meet to drive to the Justice Gang interview in a really funny scene. I gotta say though, I wish the Justice Gang scene wasn't in the trailer because this would have been such an exciting surprise, and the idea of them appearing in the previously on segment would have felt less likely, and this is probably all we're gonna get from the Justice Gang in this season, so putting it in the trailer obviously made sense to generate hype for this season, but I don't think that was necessary. Peacemaker is a popular show. I think it would have been a popular show regardless, and putting in the trailer kind of spoiled what could have been a really cool surprise or two. What was the surprise is that this is where White Rabbit appears, possibly her only appearance, at least for now, in a surprisingly comic accurate costume. I really thought they'd change that, but hey, it's not exactly the most crude part of the episode. That honor goes to the orgy scene, which was insane, almost definitely made some people who watched the episode with others really uncomfortable. Luckily, I watched it alone. Oh, wait. Frankly, I don't think this was entirely necessary. It feels like the boys' level of shock value, but also, yeah, I can imagine Peacemaker doing this. Honestly, I was a lot more surprised by Chris doing drugs. Being as jacked as John Cena, the only drug that I would ever expect him to take is steroids. But anyway, getting back to the Justice Gang, the interview was still a really great scene, feeling very different from the trailer, as in the trailer it felt more funny, but here it comes off as really mean-spirited towards Peacemaker. It kind of made me feel bad for him, while also hating Guy, Kendra, and Lord, which I think was the point. They are definitely assholes. Amelia Harcourt has an interesting role in this episode, the toxic masculinity scene being really funny, her scene with Peacemaker being interesting, it seems like they slept together in between seasons, and then her fight scene. Between the two major action scenes of this episode, there's one which is a woman fighting a bunch of drunks in a bar, which is more typical, compared to the other one, which is a superhero fighting his alternate superhero self in a quantum unfolding chamber area. Obviously that one is more interesting, but this one is definitely more brutal. The choreography was great, super brutal, and they also make a point of showing Harcourt really instigating and then smiling at the end, as if the fight is exactly what she wanted. Gunn has said this season will show how Harcourt is in a much worse place compared to season 1. This episode definitely perfectly demonstrates that. Also, Harcourt disses 30 Seconds to Mars and therefore Jared Leto twice. Great. Fuck that guy. Vigilante is unfortunately only in one scene in this episode. He is hilarious in this scene and clearly as into hanging out with Economos as he was with Peacemaker, but it is only one scene, which is a shame because Vigilante is the best. Speaking of Economos, he's working for Argus, who has a brief but really effective introduction in this episode with the return of Flag and the introduction of Sasha Bordeaux. The two have clear chemistry and great banter, generally well written, and generally a great idea to bring in Flag as an antagonist to Peacemaker. Generally speaking, this episode was a pretty perfect episode 1, meaning while it wasn't the most exciting for the most part, it perfectly bridged season 1 to 2 and perfectly laid the groundwork for what's to come, while delivering some really funny moments, great and brutal action, fantastical musical choices, writing and acting, and a great case of world building expanding the DCU. My biggest issues are, for one, I think the pacing was a bit slow. I definitely wanted more of Vigilante, but the main thing is that this episode was almost entirely shown in the trailers, or at least the big moments were, which isn't great for this episode, but it's fantastic for the rest of the season because that means we barely saw anything of the season. We mostly only really saw episode 1, so I am hyped. Still, definitely a great start to the season, deserving of an 8 out of 10. Can't wait to see what comes next. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought about Peacemaker Season 2 Episode 1.